Hi, everybody. Welcome to the KPRC 2 Sports Podcast. This is episode number 4. I'm Randy McIlvoy alongside Ari Alexander. Good to see you again this week as we dive into what's happening, the big sports news across H-Town. And we've been not lacking on topics the first 3 episodes of this new podcast. By the way, we hope you're enjoying it. This is episode 4, so we're approaching a month now of doing this. And Ari, we're going to spend a few minutes with the folks talking about what went down at the trade deadline with baseball. It got so much attention across the big leagues, definitely here in Houston, with what GM James Click was going to do. And you know what? Big picture, they made moves, but they didn't give up a lot to get the reinforcements that came to Houston, and I was really happy about that. But let's open just general comments on your thoughts, and we'll both weigh in on the additions, starting with Trey Mancini.
Yeah, largely I thought James Click did a good job, and unless you're super into these mid-level prospects, I think that they got really good value for what they gave up. And you got to keep in mind, yes, the championship window for this team is going to be open for a while, but right now it's very open. This is potentially the best team in baseball, and you need to add pieces to make sure that you're over the top in an ALCS against the Yankees and a potential – it's Mike here, and the potential World Series against any of these really good National League teams. But we'll start with Mancini. I got to talk to him a little bit today after the game in the locker room. Hit his first home run already. Loves those Crawford boxes.
That was really cool. I think he's really going to like those. Who doesn't like – if you have a little power,
right?
Who doesn't like the Crawford boxes?
You're a right-handed batter, yeah. I mean, the book on him was he would have hit a bunch more bombs at Camden Yards if they didn't have that giant wall in his further back, and he'd have like 20 home runs or something if he had played all of his games at Minute Maid. And so I think that he is going to really enjoy playing here. I think Astros fans are going to like him. He's just very calm, nice guy, beat cancer. He's got a great backstory. Right. Orioles fans love him, and you can see why.
Sat out the 2020 season. I mean, I saw some of his comments. I don't know if you saw what he did in the clubhouse in Arlington when he got traded. They ran some from the Orioles broadcast, and man, he couldn't say enough good things about. I mean, he went through. Let's face it, he went through a lot during that period. And he credited not only team doctors, but the training staff there with the Baltimore Orioles. And, I mean, he made sure that night, even though he was leaving the club, that he wanted to make sure they knew what they all meant to him during that process. But, man, you know what? We saw him in the clubhouse yesterday, or I should say, what is today, Thursday or Wednesday? On Tuesday. Right? What's today? Thursday?
Today's Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. All these days are kind of mounting here. So Tuesday at Minute Maid, when he arrived, he was in uniform, just had a pinch hit appearance, but started Wednesday's game at Minute Maid, has a home run. But the cool thing, and you've been around the team too, I love this Astros clubhouse because there's really no egos on this team. They're going to welcome him with open arms, and he's going to fit right in. It's not going to take long for him to feel comfortable. He probably already does after 2 days meeting these guys. But he said he really didn't know a lot of the guys. He was familiar with, like, Stanek, I think, facing him when Stanek was in the AL East a little bit. But he's getting to know some of these guys. But I think he's going to be a good piece. You know, he's not the replacement for Yuli Gurriel, but Gurriel has struggled, but he's starting to show signs of life with the bat. But he's a good piece to have. Spelling Gurriel, can DH, can play a little outfield, especially because we don't know what's happening. I'm very concerned about Michael Brantley right now.
Yeah, I mean, Brantley's still working out that shoulder, and I think he talked a little bit today, so I was reading some of the comments that he's trying really hard to come back, and it
can't even swing a bat yet.
I don't think so, no. Yeah. And it could be a little longer term, and hopefully he's back by the playoffs. But if not, Trey Mancini is such a perfect move because he plays left, he plays first, he DHs, he can do a little bit of everything. He's decent against both righties and lefties. He fits a lot of needs, and the early part of I can get my notes here of my deadline notes out, but the early part of before the trade deadline happened, the Mets were very strongly in on Mancini because he is a rental. They found the prospect cost too high. Astros James Click swooped in. They made that 3-team trade. They got really creative because the Orioles straight up did not need Jose Siri. But the Rays were really in on outfielders, and they got David Peralta, and they needed a center fielder because all of their outfielders are hurt right now.
Yeah.
And Jose Siri was on their list, and they made it work. They had a little 3-team trade. They flipped some prospects. Mancini goes to Houston. Houston gets rid of Siri, who was the odd man out in center field, and then the Rays get what they want. And so it ended up working out really well for all these teams. But depth-wise, I think this really helps the offense. I think this helps like the length of the lineup. Because when you look at the 2019, I came here in 2019. So 2019 and 2021, the teams that made to the World Series, 1 through 7, their offense is terrifying. 8 and 9, you had Chirinos and Josh Reddick in 2019.
Right.
Last year, 8 and 9 was Maldonado and Jake Myers before he got hurt. I guess they were using McCormick and Siri at the end there. But 1 through 7, there were no weak spots whatsoever. Yuli had won the batting title last year. Correa was in that lineup, and Bregman, and I know Bregman had the broken wrist, the secret broken wrist, but then there was Brantley and Altuve and everything, and then Springer in 2019. 1 through 7, it's like Springer, Altuve, and Brantley, and Bregman, and Jordan, and it's terrifying. And this is even before like Cal Tucker in 2019, right? So for a long time, the Astros have only had 2 real weak spots in the lineup at 8 and 9. 1 through 7, they've been the best in baseball for like 4 straight years. And I think this is what helps with Trey Mancini, because now you can have 7 consecutive good hitters. You're putting maybe McCormick.
No weak links.
No weak links.
Yep.
You're putting maybe McCormick, who's actually been hitting really well the last few weeks, at 8, or Jake Myers if he gets back to what he's supposed to do. And then Maldonado's been a league average hitter the last 2 months.
Yeah,
and you have
definitely
him
in July
at 9.
for sure. He really broke out, especially with power. He had like 4 or 5 home runs.
He's been his OPS since June 1st is like 703, and the league average is 707.
Yeah.
He's been perfectly fine.
We'll take it. Of course, Mancini got a lot of attention. They get Christian Vasquez from Boston. That whole thing was weird. Obviously Boston being in town, and they were right there in Minute Maid Park, and he was pregame when the word leaked. He was speaking with the media, didn't even know that he had been traded. He was asked the questions. He was just talking as if he was still a member of the Red Sox. And then you get the old tap on the shoulder from the PR guy.
Yep. Hey, get out of here.
You're not talking anymore. Yeah. And that had to be a weird deal. He was close, obviously, with a lot of those guys. Big part of their playoff runs in recent years. And but everything I've heard is he's a team first guy. I was speaking with, and I think a lot of people know the name Kevin Millar from MLB Network. Kevin was at Minute Maid on Tuesday, and he and I go back to 1992 when he was at Lamar University, and I was working in Beaumont, so I covered him and got to know him, and we've been friends for a long time. But we ran into each other. He was there doing the Red Sox broadcast, and I said, tell me about Vasquez. He said, total class act, great defensive catcher, awesome with pitchers, similar to what we're seeing and know about Martin Maldonado. And then he looked and he said, and he can hit.
Yeah.
I mean, sure enough, you look at his numbers when he was traded, I don't know what it is now, but 280-ish. 7, 8 home runs, and very respectable. So it's a good piece to have, man. You got Martin; they're good friends. So I don't think there's any tension between those two. But he's good to have on the club. But he's a rental as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like they gave up these 2 lower level prospects, Wilyer Abreu, who I honestly don't know a whole lot about.
Yep.
I do know some about Emmanuel Valdez because he was in AAA with Sugarland for a bit, and he had gotten really hot. He was hitting well in AA. He got sent up, and he was really hot in AAA.
Right.
That's a guy whose the prospect ranking list is a little different from what he's viewed now. He's ranked like 28 or 29, and now he's more viewed of like 7, 8, 9. And that was the same thing happened with Mancini that happened with Christian Vasquez. So the Mets and the Red Sox were engaged. The Red Sox for a long time have liked this AAA third baseman named Mark Vientos. Raw power, really good, would play well at Fenway. And the Mets didn't want to get rid of Vientos for a rental. So the Astros swooped in and said, okay, will you do this 29th ranked prospect, middle infielder Wilyer Abreu, and this Valdez kid who's been hot lately for Vasquez. And it worked. And so they got that deal done. And this fits into the timeline that the Astros have with their catchers, because Martin Maldonado is 10 games away from his vesting option hitting, and he's going to get paid $5 million next year to be their catcher.
Right.
Corey Lee has gotten a little bit of time this year. He's clearly not ready to.
He needs more AAA.
He does.
No
He's clearly not ready to be the number 2 catcher on a playoff contender, real World Series contender type of team. Vasquez, plenty of experience in the playoffs. Perfect signing, or perfect trade rather, for the Astros. And then next year, Vasquez is gone. You bring up Corey Lee, he's going to have a full season, or you see what you have in Jainer Diaz.
Right, who's climbing up quickly.
Yeah.
Man.
Organizational depth is really good at that catcher position. They needed immediate help. and I don't think they lost very much for that immediate help. So that's two phenomenal trades. I'm very impressed with what James Click did so far this
They should
deadline.
get, if their report card comes out, I don't know if they have a league-wide, but it's got to be an A.
Yeah,
A minus, whatever. It's in that A category because three guys, the third guy we haven't even mentioned, Will Smith, the reliever from Atlanta. I mean, he gave up Jake Odorizzi, but, man, it's a crowded rotation. You got so many. You got a surplus of starting pitchers. I mean, they can afford to give up one of those.
And Odorizzi had the bigger
Urquidy.
contract. Yeah, and Urquidy comes out today and goes 7 innings, scoreless.
Struck out 10.
10, gives up, 2 hits, and had a perfect year, a no-hitter or whatever, going through 5.
Yeah.
Urquidy also has that Game 4 in 2019 in the World Series. I just don't think you can part with him because of that.
Totally
because
agree.
You saw
agree.
You saw what he can do in a super high-pressure situation as a rookie. So you know he's cool in that situation. He ditched the cutter in June.
Right.
He's been great since. And now, because of how well he's pitching, I think Urquidy might be your Game 4 starter instead of Luis Garcia in the playoffs.
I would have no problem with that at all. Odorizzi, on him, he was just hit and miss. I mean, then he kind of got hot, then had the setback. He was out for a while. Everybody's wondering, okay, is he going to come back to the rotation? What's his role going to be? It's just – I think not only, and I'm sure Dusty and them felt the same way, is which Odorizzi was going to show up. I mean, you pretty much, when you hear, okay, Urquidy's going to start, you and I are both saying, okay, probably going to be a pretty good 6+ inning start unless something weird happens.
Worst case scenario, 5 innings, a 2-run ball, 3-run ball.
Odorizzi, you didn't know if he was out going to be one of those nights where he's done in 2 innings and because he's getting rocked, or, he was like his last start, pretty good. So I think that was a good move. Odorizzi gets a fresh start there in Atlanta on a really good team. And Astros get Will Smith to come in, that left-hander. And you and I have been talking. Dusty really wanted a left-hander, but they've had guys, right-handed guys, that have been good against left-handed hitters.
Yeah, so that's what I heard from the organization a couple days before the trade deadline was we are not going to overpay for a left-hander because Hector Neris and Ryan Stanek have reverse splits and have been really good. If we can find the right deal, sure, we'll get a left-hander, but we're not just going to get a left-hander to get a left-hander.
Right.
And Odorizzi, straight up, for Will Smith is another good deal. Will Smith is expensive, so you have to trade him to, if you're the Braves, you have to trade him to a team that's willing to eat that money, that's willing to pay, $5 million or whatever he has left on his deal. It's a $13 million a year contract for him.
Right.
And the Astros, because they didn't sign Carlos Correa in the offseason, have this big window in between what their payroll is and what the luxury tax window is. And so they can do that. And I think that was set up this way. It's like, let's see how the first few months go. We have plenty of room to make deadline additions. And we have plenty of money that if we need to add to our payroll at the deadline, we have plenty of room to do it. And that's exactly what happened because Odorizzi was kind of expensive too. So it was a deal that worked out well for both teams. The Braves needed back-end rotation depth. The Astros needed a left-handed reliever. Both teams are trading from a position of strength. The Braves have way too many left-handed relievers, and that's one of the reasons I think they beat the Astros in the World Series last year because you are just not
more arms on that side.
Yeah, you're just not used to seeing left-handed starter Max Fried, followed by 6th inning AJ Minter, followed by 7th inning Tyler Matzek, followed by 8th inning Will Smith. Lefty, 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 lefty. No team has that. And the Braves use that to their advantage. And this year, those guys are all a little diminished. They might not be able to use that same formula in the playoffs.
I'm not ruling out, too. I'm not saying the Astros are a lock to go to the World Series or not. I think they're going to go deep. It's going to. I just don't see them avoid. I think it's going to be Yankees-Astros unless something really odd happens in the postseason.
Right.
So who knows who's going to advance the World Series. Hopefully it is the Astros. But, hey, as good as the Dodgers have been, I'm sure the Padres are now going to make a run with their additions. And it all depends on who's hot. But, man, Atlanta's playing really good again. And we saw what happened in the playoffs last year. They went and took care of the Dodgers. Who knows? Maybe we'll get another Astros-Braves World Series. But they certainly have the pieces, as do the Astros now.
Yeah, Raisel Iglesias, too. They had a really good deadline. There's going to be, I think, a huge difference between the AL playoffs and the NL playoffs. The AL playoffs, I think it's just Yankees, Astros, ALCS. No other team is even close to those two. NL playoffs, there's like 6
There's a lot of good teams.
Dodgers,
a lot
Padres,
of good teams.
Cardinals, Braves, Mets, 5 teams that all can make a run.
Fun to watch.
Yeah.
And it'll be here before we know it. Final stretch of the season. You got the month of August, September, a few days into October, a little bit later ending this year, but then they'll get it going. And it's looking like the Astros are on pace to get they don't have to play that first play-in wild card round or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they'll get a few days. So maybe that first weekend, maybe in October, might be their when they begin their playoff run. But it's going to be fun. But the Astros, after Wednesday's game, depends on when you're listening to this podcast right now, when they ended their homestand, 68-38, so 30 games over 500. They avoided the sweep and got the win over the Red Sox, and now back on the road against Cleveland. So we will keep an eye on things, but we want to check in here on the KPRC2 podcast, talk a little Astros with you after the trade deadline came and went, and as you heard Ari and I talk, very productive moves by GM James Click, and he mentioned in his news conference on Tuesday that, you know what, just praising owner Jim Crane. He said, this guy wants to win. He just tells us, go do what you need to do to win. So you got to love an owner that's giving you that open door to go.
Yeah, gave him the
spend
resources.
some more money and get players.
Yeah, gave the resources, made the trades. The only thing that I think that can be criticized, and I totally understand why they did it, is Siri. Jose Siri, I think, fits a really, really specific role on a good team. There's two types of teams that Jose Siri makes sense for. A really good team like the Astros, where he can be a backup center fielder, play good defense. He's number 2 in the league in center field defense, and then speed on the base paths. Or a bad team where he can get every day at bats because he's streaky, and if he's not hitting every day, it gets cold, and then if he can get hot. He's on the Rays now, which is kind of in the middle. The Rays are a good team, but like everyone in their outfield is hurt, and so he's going to be their starting center fielder.
Maybe good for him.
It would be, but he's hitting 5th in their lineup.
Wow. So if he can really get that confidence with the bat offensively on the big league level, he's going to develop into a really nice player. He's already shown flashes of what he can do defensively. So, and a little bit with the bat, just not as consistent
and
on
the
the big league level.
AAA,
he's been fine. But
AAA, he's too good for
the big
that
league level. Maybe the new home for him in Tampa will be what Jose Siri's looking for. So we're going to wrap it up, and hope you enjoyed it. Our episode number 4 of the KPRC2 Sports podcast. I'm not sure where you're listening this on, Click to Houston or KPRC2 Plus, but we appreciate you listening and checking it out. We'll do it each and every week right here on the KPRC2 Sports Podcast. For Ari Alexander, I'm Randy McIlvoy. We will talk again next week. Take care.